Welcome to TLC for the Soul podcast, where soul meets spirit. You have entered into sacred space. I'm your host, Tammy Lynn Chambers, and I'm here to help you shine. Now let's get going on this podcast journey. Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. I am excited to be bringing you a new November episode of Turkey Pot Pie, going back again to Abigail and Dakkar and Polly and Scratchy and all of the gang at the Spectre and Book Coven. And this month, though, we are going to a spooky little inn in the Scottish Highlands for a little bit of a break. You would think it's a break, but it's not really a break. So in a moment, we're going to get into the episode, but first I'd like to share with you a little bit about some special offers I have for you. Welcome to the magical month of November. I just wanted to share with you a few things before we get into the story. First, being the book of the month. So if you are interested in these stories and reading or listening to more from me, I do have a book, one of my books that I feature every month. So I have quite a few series of books out there. And this month we are focused on the Shaman's Awakening series. And the first book in all of my series is always free to read wherever ebooks are sold. So this month we are featuring Shapeshift, the first in the Shaman's Awakening series. This is a short story about Tatiana Gallegos, a shaman of a small village in South America, who has been told by her spirit guides that she has been chosen to help humanity in the New Earth ascension process. So she doesn't really know what that means. She has all sorts of magical friends, a gnome and her owl familiar, and along her journey she meets up with many different friends in the forest and along the way. And she goes through the beginning parts of her initiation into the ascension process. And so through reading about her experiences, I'm hoping that will help some of you who are also coming to understand, what does that mean to be awakening or spiritually awakening. So that book is free to read on, like I said, any ebook platform, Google Books, Apple Books, Kobo, Barnes & Noble. It's all over the place. The only place it isn't free is on Amazon, because I did not want to sign up for their program where I would have to only limit my books to selling through them. So it's 99 cents over on Amazon. So that is one thing. The other thing is this month of November, I'm also offering a special drawing or contest or whatever you want to call it, to be written into this month's story. So every month, Spirit draws a name of a listener who's interested, who has entered for the giveaway. And the name will be, like I said, they'll randomly, intuitively choose it. And then you will be written into this story somehow as a persona, as a character or a person. You'll get to choose your character name, and then Spirit will deliver to you, as you being part of the story, whatever is most needed by you in this now. So it could be a healing journey. You could come in as a character who helps the bringers of the light. You could come in as a character who is there to gain or gather information for themselves. So anything that you need in this now for you on your personal journey will be delivered to your character as part of the story. So you get to read and follow along. And that's basically your quote unquote reading, if you want to call it that. So if you are interested in this giveaway, it's starting on the day that this podcast is published, and it's going to run through November 15th. So on November 16th, the Spirit will choose a winner, and then from there on to the end of the story, which is somewhere around the end of this month, you'll be written in. To join that, there's several ways to do it, whatever works best for you, and it depends on where you're listening to this podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, then the link is down in the description of the video for that. If you're listening on a podcast platform, then the link would be in the show notes. So like Google or Apple Podcasts, because this podcast is available like all over the place, and Spotify, the links will be there. Or you can also, if you can't find a way to enter on any of those, you can either send an email to the show's email address, and that is also noted in the show notes and description, or you can join us at TLC Books. That's my Instagram handle, and that is where the page-a-days of the story, the written part of the story, gets uploaded pretty much every day, unless I skip a day or so. But the story is pretty much every day, and you can either direct message me there, or you can comment on any of the posts in the November page-a-days and just say you want to be entered into the contest. And that's all you have to do. There's nothing special that you have to do. You don't have to go to any certain place and subscribe to all my channels or anything like that. You just have to go to one place, one time is all you need to do, and just say you're interested in entering. So that is enough for now. I just wanted to share those offers with you. I'm really excited for the contest, and I hope you are too. And like I said, the winner will be announced on the 16th. So let's now just take a minute to pause, enter into our sacred little space if you choose to do so. Grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee or whatever you would like to drink to relax, and listen to this first installment of Turkey Pot Pie. Hello everyone, here we are. So let's just, as we always do at the beginning of the story, just kind of take a deep breath and get comfortable. And I invite you to listen in whatever way feels or resonates with you. So some people may be joining and listening just for the ASMR. Some may want the light language activations or downloads that are coming through my voice. Some of you may want to just call in your own spirit guides and ask for whatever messages might be pertinent for you as you're listening to the story. And some of you may just want to hear the story and don't want to do any of that other stuff. So whatever resonates for you, just set your intention now and just allow yourself to relax. Possibly if you're able to close your eyes. Some people listen to this while they're driving, or, it's not going to hurt either way. But I would say if you're choosing to get a download or spirit messages, that you're not driving around while you're listening. You're comfortable somewhere. So without further ado, we're going to get into Turkey Pot Pie, Chapter 1, Dakkar's Next Move. The autumn festival had been a hit in more ways than one. Abigail had won the Aston Martin and the hearts of the judges for her vegetable pie recipe. She had also very much won the heart of a daring and very mysterious warlock. Dakkar still wouldn't tell her where he had been spirited off to that dark night while she watched from under the stairs. He told her that she needn't concern herself with such matters, but it still irked her slightly that she had been led to believe something had taken him from her. He still held certain mysteries and charms close to his heart. He did make the lost time and worry-filled fretting up to her by planning a fun getaway for them in the Scottish Highlands. They would have the whole Argyle Inn B&B to themselves for the entire second week of November. She had made him promise that they would be alone and that no sinister forces might come knocking on the door to take him away again. She was convinced she had seen this, although Dakkar never really let on that she had. The plan was for Abigail to meet Dakkar at the inn on the Friday afternoon of the week before they were to check in. That would give her time to pack, and for her to pick up the new car she had just won. She would drive the car to the ferry and take it across, driving the rest of the way after picking up Dakkar along the way. She wasn't happy he was leaving again so soon after their reunion, but he promised it would be well worth it for her and others. Again, the mystery. He shushed away her questions with hot tea and an even hotter night in his bed. And in between lovemaking and the excitement over the new ride, she stopped protesting and asking questions. She was just so overjoyed to have him back at her side again. And although he didn't always gush with his love for her, he figured that it spoke for itself in kind words, gestures, and deeds. Among those being his art of always knowing how she was feeling before she even knew she was feeling that way. He could then address any errant emotions that came up by quelling them with heartfelt discussion and a healing hand. He knew her body and soul, and she him, and she wouldn't have it any other way. So she lay content in his arms as they made plans for the getaway. And the fact that all seemed right in the world, or at least in her small part of it, swayed her into a peaceful silence. But as always, dear reader, one never can tell how suddenly things can change. And as destiny would have it, the Argyle Inn B&B held a secret all its own. And Abigail and Dakkar had unwillingly been drawn here. Of course, the light would say it was this that had brought them to the online listing for the quaint cottage, with a small staff to cater to their every need. But the true reason for the swift transaction that ended with Dakkar wondering how easy it had been to rent the 5-star cottage at peak season belied the fact that they were being drawn here by something else that might not have the light's best interest at heart. If the dark could even have a heart. Well, it beat, but that was about that. So back to Abigail and Dakkar. "We should take the Aston to my mom so she can see it," Abigail said, getting up from the large 4-poster bed to shut the French doors of Dakkar's cottage. The ocean air was chilling the large bedroom, and it was time for a fire in the stone fireplace. What the cottage lacked in modern-day conveniences it made up for in charm. And still no prospective buyers, Abigail thought, wondering where Dakkar would go if and when the old home did sell. Getting too far ahead of myself again, she thought to herself. She put several large logs in the fireplace, added some kindling, and then popped her wand 4 times at the whole thing. The kindling sputtered to a start, and in a few minutes a large cozy fire was burning. They pulled the blankets and pillows to the floor and ate biscuits and honey and Irish mead, stopping in between bites to talk about how Polly and Scratchy had reunited. The old black cat was none the worse for wear, and Polly and the familiar had shown up like clockwork the next morning at the chai house for the Spectre and Book Coven meeting. The cat almost smiling from its place at the end of the settee in the upstairs lounge. Both Abigail and Dakkar noticed how resilient it had seemed and wondered what the old cat had seen while at Count Machar's. They had proposed a séance of sorts to tap into the cat's consciousness, but Polly would have none of it. Poor Scratchy needed his rest and recovery after being in the company of such dark energy, and Polly did not want to subject the sweet pussy cat to more recollections of what Machar had done there, although Scratchy looked as if he could care less. Scratchy had come from old black cat stock, the bloodline of so many other witches' familiars in his veins. It was still uncertain his age or even how he had come to Polly exactly, but that will stay hidden for another time. Right now, Abigail and Dakkar couldn't care much about Scratchy, as they were too entranced with each other. They would figure that out later. Abigail had packing to do, and Dakkar had to do whatever Dakkar had to do. He called it work, but Abigail still wasn't certain what the work was. She didn't care so much about it when he was enchanting her with his mystical charms, but sometimes late at night she would wake and ponder him more. Clearly she wasn't imagining him, but at times he did seem too good to be true. But enough about Abigail and Dakkar. For now we jump to the Argyle Inn B&B to meet with its proprietors, Mr. and Mrs. Albie Chalmers. Chapter 2, The Argyle Inn. When we bring you to the Argyle the first time, you will not recall when you last saw this place, for many of you have visited it in dream time and astral travel. Many bringers of light have passed through these doors, and that is precisely why our beautiful duo had been unknowingly summoned here. There was work to be done. Albie Chalmers spent his afternoon repairing the shutters on the old English cottage up in the northernmost part of the Scottish Highlands. He didn't like being outside after dark this time of year. There were strange sounds coming from the moors, and it was ones he hadn't heard before. But there were guests coming for the next week, and Mrs. Chalmers had insisted that he make those repairs. He had been married to Maggie Chalmers now for what seemed like eternity, but really had been about 40 years. But age often doesn't matter, and so it was for the Chalmers. Some folks defied time and some did not. The Chalmers looked like they were still in their 20s and never let on to anyone of their real age. Some things just weren't spoken about, and Maggie Chalmers liked it to remain that way. The Argyle had been in her family for as long as her ancestral tree could go back into historical records. Maggie had wanted to destroy those records, but some distant family member had posted the whole thing to some ancestry website along with photos of the Argyle. And as fate would have it, many had been drawn there by the seemingly sordid and sometimes unexplainable happenings at the inn. The house and surrounding buildings making up the B&B really had a life of their own, and it had put out a call for just as student and worthwhile an innkeeper to take on when the old caretaker had suddenly disappeared. And Maggie had been asked by her maternal grandmother to take over. That had seemed like another lifetime ago. Now the cottage was becoming quite popular. The Chalmers had the funds to do much-needed repairs, although the seemingly larger repairs seemed to take care of themselves. Maggie Chalmers fluffed her powder puff across her cheeks and sprayed some curly-Q spray into her golden hair. I must always look my best, she bestowed upon her image in the ornate dressing mirror in her bedroom. Mr. Chalmers was only allowed in there upon invitation, and he never did otherwise. For to step into her chambers without being called or offered meant a swift and heavy fine for Albie. He might not see her again for a while, and he didn't want that. They needed each other, and the Argyle needed her most of all. For when she left to do her other work, when called in by the bringers of the Dark Forces Battalion, the inn made poor Albie Chalmers suffer. It did not like to be alone. Albie was pretty much by default arm candy for Maggie, and she loved it that way. Albie kept his manly charm and good looks in full swing by doing laps around the moors every morning. But when darkness came, he was always inside the inn's gates, and more so in his own area of the cottage. He interacted with the staff and made sure that everything was in order for the coming guests, and then he busied himself with odd repair jobs here and there. He had to have some purpose. He couldn't just hang around waiting for Maggie's call. Sometimes that took a while to come. Maggie had her way with others, and he just simply had to wait his turn. And so it was with the Argyle, leading up to the week that the well-placed ad had shown up for Dakkar. He liked mystery and had been asked to book a room by someone who had an idea what was happening up there, but no real proof, so to speak. And so this had been reported to the Bringers of the Light ground crew station, and the ad had been strategically placed for Dakkar to find. Now, why the Light Squad didn't just call Dakkar directly and hand him some assignment is another story. For now, we'll trust that Dakkar liked to work his own magic and in his own way and just leave it at that. And so with a dash of mystery and the promise of a visit off-grid where he could spend time with his queen, he had presented the gift to Abigail. And she had accepted, just as he knew she would. He needed her on this assignment, but he wasn't going to let on to her that there even was an assignment. He needed her to figure it out for herself. And so it goes. Abigail found herself humming as she packed her suitcase and made some of her travel potion for the trip. She always got a little woozy on the ferry. Her humming reaching its own crescendo as she packed, she found a stray sock under the bed. But before she could figure out why it was there, Rainicourt flew pell-mell into the room, grabbing the sock in his large black beak and spiriting it away. That sock should not have been there, and the large raven familiar knew that. No one would be putting any protection spells against his mistress as long as he was around to take care of her. Abigail thought it strange and figured she would check in with the bird when he returned. But for now she had to finish her packing and then head down to Crest to check in on Miranda. From there it was straight to the Chai House for the Spectre and Book Coven meeting. She needed to talk to Polly, and that was the perfect time. She had a strange feeling inside, and she needed to share it with someone. Chapter 3. When the Bell Tolls. The bell over the door to the Chai House tinkled lightly as Abigail entered. She always loved that sound. It made her feel like she was coming home, and for as long as the coven had been meeting there, it really did feel like a second home. She smiled at Marissa and gave Eve a light pat on the back as she made her way up to the coven's special book nook on the second floor of the tea room. The coven met here regularly under the guise of a book club, but mainly to talk to each other about the work of the coven. Not every member worked directly for the Bringers of the Light. Some had been outposted to other similar groups that worked with the earth or with children and such, all, though, being driven by the need to serve others on the planet through workings of the light. Polly had already arrived, and Scratchy was chasing his tail over in the corner, seeming to be playing, but really trying to catch a wayward pixie that had wandered inside at the scent of freshly baked scones. Rebecca was there with her tarot card deck, doing a quick reading for one of the kitchen staff who needed an update on the love interest of her boyfriend. And the newest member of the group, Tamber, was there with her falcon familiar, Jameson. Tamber had been recommended for the coven by Rebecca's grandmother, who thought if the very talented but young witch didn't find her calling, she might fall in with the wrong group. Tamber was a beautiful Scottish witch with long dark hair that fell about her face. She loved to wear pixie ears and used Jameson to fly special secret missions for her own amusement. This time the peregrine came back with some small bottle tucked into his beak. He flew in through the open window and deposited the little pill bottle in Tamber's lap. "Just something I needed for my latest project," Tamber said as Polly eyed her with curiosity. "Well, my dear, you most certainly are doing something quite mysterious. If you can't share it with us, then who can you share it with?" Polly said, hoping to coax the girl out of her shell. She realized there was a big age difference, but hoped Tamber would see her as the grandmother she never had. It was unclear who Tamber's family really was. The girl didn't share much outside of the latest work she was doing on her magic. Abigail went round and hugged each woman, whispering into Polly's ear. "May I speak to you in private for a few moments?" she asked the older woman. "But of course, dear," Polly said, rising and shooing Scratchy away from Jameson. The two often didn't get along. "Let's go upstairs to the coven's private room," Polly said. This was a room that the group rented from Larimar directly and was used for working with private clients or making magic that couldn't be done out in the open of the Chai House. The door closed firmly behind them. Abigail unbuttoned her coat and placed it on a chair. "Polly, I have a weird feeling about my trip with Dakkar next week," she confided. "I just can't put my finger on it, but I have a strange feeling about the place," she said, helping the older witch to sit down on the fluffy sofa. "Why, what do you mean, dear?" Polly said, ears pricking up whenever any of the women brought up feeling funny about anything. Polly Willikers had been with the Bringers of the Light since before anyone could even recall. She had, through time, been one of the founding members of the Light Brigade and hailed back farther than the ancient Druids who had first started forming something resembling covens so long ago. So needless to say, she was most adept at teasing out dark forces. "Well, Dakkar found this B&B online in a very remote part of the Highlands," Abigail went on, shivering at the thought of it. "Of course, I trust him completely, but I still have my doubts about why he was spirited away that night at his home. He's never let on about it, so sometimes that just stays in the back of my mind," she said, twirling her sweater around in her hands, playing with the small bone buttons. "My love," Polly said, with great affection for the young witch, "you must know now that often the Bringers of the Light are given special assignments, ones they are not able to share with anyone. That includes their paramour, Polly said, trying to reassure Abigail that everything was fine. You can trust him, Polly said with a special affinity for knowing good stock when she felt it. And Dakkar was as good a light bringer as any other. And if Polly had been any younger... she put that thought out of her mind lest the younger girl pick up on it. I know, Abigail said. It's just sometimes I get the feeling he is unwittingly drawing me into his special assignments, and I don't know if I always have the stamina for it, she said, knowing her limits. Well, my dear, I know that you wouldn't have been called into the bringers of the light if they didn't think you could handle it. I say you give Dakkar the benefit of the doubt, and if it turns out otherwise, then you both need to speak about it. And as Polly felt into the energy of the Argyle Inn B&B, a heavy feeling entered her heart. Dear Abigail would certainly be tested this time, she thought, holding out her hands to take the younger girl's in hers. Yes, my dear, you simply must trust, Polly said. And as she did, the church bell in the clock tower tolled 3 times. Power of 3, they both said at the same time, as Abigail eased her mind into the knowing that if she simply trusted, everything would be just fine. Chapter 4. All is Well. You would think that all was well in the reading of the first bits of this chapter, but as it is going now, all was not necessarily well behind the scenes at the Argyle. Of course, Maggie Chalmers had made implicit instructions of the staff to not disturb her as she went about her nightly duties, but some things just could not be helped. As Albie Chalmers settled into his room for the night, the bell over the front room of the Argyle rang 3 times. The person responsible for responding to incoming callers at the inn, regardless of the hour, was young Dwight O'Malley. Dwight was just finishing his dinner when the bell rang. "Collie," he said, speaking to the chef. "Can you please put my dinner in the oven?" he asked, handing the half-eaten plate to her. "Sure, Dwight," she said, placing the plate of roasted duck and sweet dumplings in the warm oven. "But it won't taste the same later," she protested, knowing it was a waste of time. If only they were able to truly enjoy her culinary talents. But Maggie had strict rules about the type of food to be served at the inn, and just because Collie graduated at the top of her class in culinary school didn't mean she could do whatever she wanted. Dwight went unwillingly toward the front door, pausing to pick up a small bouquet of wildflowers. It was customary for new guests to be offered a small gift before entering the inn. Some sort of strange custom brought forward by Maggie Chalmers, among other seemingly weird ones that he didn't want to think about right now. He pulled his collar up around his neck, buttoning his shirt closed. Best to look the part, he thought to himself. And holding the small bouquet, he opened the door to the inn. Before him stood Abigail and Dakkar, looking a little wet around the edges. He had forgotten that guests were supposed to arrive tonight. "Please come in," Dwight said, holding out the bouquet. "But before you cross the threshold, please accept this gift from your proprietress," he said dutifully. He knew it sounded stupid, but Maggie Chalmers had made it very clear that guests were not to enter inside without first accepting the gift. Abigail eyed the gaily colored bouquet and reached out to take it from Dwight's hand. When she did, a cold chill passed through her body, and thinking it the wet night air, she dismissed the well-timed synchronicity and accepted the flowers. "Please enter and welcome to the Argyle," Dwight said. "I'll take your wet coats and order your hot toddy to your room. Let's get you checked in," he said, producing a guest book and quill pen. "If you'll sign in here," he said, dipping the quill in the ink bottle. Dakkar accepted the quill pen and felt instantly unwell inside. He knew that something was not well here, but he refused to think about it right now. He was on assignment, and his main job was to make sure Abigail was comfortable and to scout around to look for clues. He hadn't been briefed on just what the clues might be, but he knew that when he needed to know, he would. The registration process taken care of, Dwight rang for Melly to come take their bags and for Collie to deliver the hot toddies to their rooms. "It's a mite bit dank outside tonight," he said, holding out his hand for Abigail as she made her way to the winding staircase that would take them to the second and third floors of the inn. "Storm's been blowing across the moors all week. Looks like it's picking up tonight. I suggest you don't go exploring after dark," he said, looking all the more mysterious, if that could be possible. You see, Dwight had a special birthmark on his neck that looked like he had been bitten by some strange creature. His eyes had also, over the years, changed to a white with pink kind of hue that looked eerie in the dimly lit rooms of the inn. He tried to hide the birthmark with tall collars and neckerchiefs, but when it showed, it always seemed to become a conversation piece, and he always chose to avoid that conversation. "Well, we won't be up for anything like that tonight," Dakkar said, not being convinced that the staff here had something to hide. "We're here for some rest and definitely relaxation," he said, squeezing Abigail's elbow. "We may not be out of our room for some time," he said, smiling slyly at her. She anticipated an amazing week with him and really was in no hurry to get outside during such a stormy and dark time of year. So if anything, this place was exactly what she needed. But Abigail still couldn't squelch the weird feeling she initially had about the inn before she even saw it. And now that she was here and had felt the strangeness of the place, she definitely felt like something might not be well, both literally and figuratively. "Thank you," she said, waiting for Dwight to unlock their door. "I would love a sandwich and some soup. Is it too late for dinner?" she asked, hoping not. "Miss, tonight we're having duck and sweet dumplings for the dinner. I'll check in with our Chef Cully and see if she's up to preparing your request," he said, with disdain for folks that arrived and thought they could just take over the place. "Tell her that I'll buy her something pretty if she'll do us this one favor," Dakkar said, holding out his hand to shake Dwight's. "Well, that remains to be seen," Dwight said, closing the door behind them and leaving them to the room. Room number 251 was called the Widow's Room, and Dakkar had purposely requested it. There was a short knock on the door as their bags were delivered, and Dwight reappeared with a silver tray carrying 2 hot toddies. "Your request has been granted," he told Dakkar, holding out his hand. "Your dinner will be up shortly," he said, grasping the euros that Dakkar slipped into his cold palm. "And now I must take my leave," he said, with a mystery all its own. And then as soon as he came, he was gone. "Well, that's a strange fellow," Dakkar said, taking Abigail around the waist. He passed her a hot toddy, and they toasted, drinking the warm, rich liquid. "There's more to that fellow than meets the eye," Abigail said. "I just can't put my finger on it, but something is so strange here," she said as she drank another sip of the toddy. "I just know it." And as they relaxed into the warmth of the room and anticipation of their dinner, a small gremlin looked on from inside the fireplace. So that, my friends, is where I am going to leave it for now. I hope you are enjoying these first few chapters. Definitely getting that November Northern Hemisphere kind of stormy, pre-winterish vibe going on. And I again invite you, if you are wanting to join our contest for the month to get written into the story, and check out any of the book offers that I mentioned earlier in the podcast. So for now, I leave you with a special message from our sponsor. Take care. The November podcasts are being brought to you by the Pixies of the Scottish Moors, here to help you get out in nature again and get into feeling into the land. This is a special time when Mother Nature is calling you outside to renew your inner child, and the Pixies of the Scottish Moors invite you to call them in to help you play, invite you into the magic of the outdoors, and to help you honor all the gifts that Gaia has to offer. So thank you for joining us here again. We will see you again in the next episode. Take care.